Hello, friends. It is 10-ish in the morning in Redmond, and it's a Tuesday, so time for API review. I am happy that the 11.0 issues still fit on one screen, and we may or may not get to the point that the whole backlog doesn't scroll, but we'll see. First up, process, try get process by ID. This is runtime 101.582. Adam couldn't join us, so I guess I'll represent it and say it's like get processed by ID, except it returns false instead of throwing if the process ID doesn't exist.
Ship it.
I think there were some discussions for um, like if you an access denied, but I actually don't think that applies here. There's invalid machine name, which Adam solved by leaving the machine name out. So this seems pretty straightforward to me. And then yes, and then try open to mirror say process handle open.
And this has the normal gotcha for users to be aware of that they can specify a process ID. That process ID can theoretically spin down and then spin back a new process with the same ID can spin up. So they could end up getting they'll get a process with that process ID if it's alive and running, but it may not necessarily be running
The
by the
process they
time they
think, yeah.
interact with the process, and it may not be the process they think it should be.
Yep, because I think they're just shorts. All right. Hey, memory extensions min and max of T.
Yeah, so for this one, it's pretty straightforward. Um, we have enumerable.min and max, works on enumerables, but we don't have a min and max that works over spans. We notably exposed a lot of APIs for spans via tensor primitives, but tensor primitives is specifically about the numeric concepts, and hence why it lives under system numerics. So if you have something like float, we have min, min magnitude, min number, min magnitude number, and all of those work on the numeric concepts. Enumerable works on the IComparable concept instead. So it explicitly relates to sort orders, working with hash sets, all the things that require you to be sensible and recoverable. So nan equals nan under that context. And so this is effectively just on span, expose the equivalent API to what um, enumerable does and in how enumerable functions, just without you requiring to get a boxed enumerable, which you can't do for a span. And then
I
we've
don't.
got the set of overloads that most other memory extension APIs have. So take an iComparer and then the generic version that allows you to take an iComparer without allocating for the specialization purpose.
Sorry, Tanner. I don't remember the tensor primitives APIs. Those are non-extensions, right? They're only static methods.
Right, they're only static methods, so they do not show up on span. You have to explicitly go into tensor primitives to get access to them, which was by design.
What's the how did we arrive at min and max versus the rest of, I mean, not the entirety of the enumerable surface area, but there are other things that show up there which would be relevant. I'm trying to rationalize the enumerable surface area versus memory extension surface area versus tensor primitive surface area. Like another alternative would be to make the things on tensor primitives extensions and add overloads that accept comparers. Why do we choose to go one way versus the other?
So tensor primitives is specifically around the math concepts, and so we viewed it as not applicable to all kinds of spans. We figured you're working in a numeric concept in a numeric context. We have these powerhouse APIs that do the efficient thing, but normally you should be using tensor of t instead, in which case you get them all as friendly extension methods. The tensor primitives is explicitly a helper class for you're building your own type, not for strictly you want to be doing general operations with span itself. We could, of course, mirror some of those that we feel are worthwhile on memory extensions, but I think for the most part, what we expose on memory extension should be closer to what we do on enumerable, where that makes sense for spans.
Plus, tensor primitives would both require an import of numerics tensors, and I think it's in a package.
Yes.
Sure. Well, sorry, I'm missing the point, Jeremy.
Of why we wouldn't just mark them as extension methods on tensor primitives. Because in order to use the min, you'd have to reference the numerics tensors package and import that namespace.
Yes.
And then
Yes.
it wouldn't work how most users would expect min to work on span, given most users probably expect it to work like enumerable min.
I'm not sure most users understand the numerical differences between
They
enumerable.
they probably don't, but that's also why I think they'd expect it to work like enumerable min and not differently. They're probably much more familiar with how enumerable min works than anything else.
So the intent functionally, this min will do all the same special casing that enumerable min does for floating point.
Yeah. And I think enumerable min only does the special casing when it can get a span out. So we should just be able to extract our current span helper to be this implementation and have enumerable min defer to it in that specialized case.
I mean,
So we
certainly
should
that'd be better than
have
duplicating.
Yeah, so we
Um,
shouldn't have code duplication.
Why min and max and not there's also like average and sum and some other ones. How did you arrive at these?
These were just the ones that had an immediate user need. There's probably room for us to go and say, let's take a holistic look at enumerable and all the APIs that it has that would also make sense for span and mirror them on span. But that is a much bigger proposal and would require a lot more thought into what does and does not make sense. And this one in particular had a user need.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, personally, I don't object to the APIs at all. I just want to make sure we're doing them in the right place consistently and that we're not underexposing.
I think we're probably underexposing today compared to what we will eventually have. And I can log a work item specifically to go through enumerable and see what we should mirror. That way we can get the full set done.
What does the overload that doesn't take a comparer do when given a non-auto comparable object?
It uses system collections, generic equality or not equality compare, the other one, dot default. The same thing that collections do whenever whenever we don't take an eye comparer for them.
I mean, that's I guess a perfectly fine answer. I don't
So
remember what the behavior is if you make a custom type that's not comparable and ask min. So
for one of the recent .NET versions, I can't remember if it was 8, 9, or 10, we added compare overloads to like 40 different memory extensions methods. I don't remember for any of them having the generic compare one for supporting struct-based compares.
We do for a couple APIs. It's now I'm trying to find it in the
Maybe binary search and sort, are those the only two?
those are at least two of them that we have.
those are the only two that use the word tcomparer according to the catalog.
I mean, we only, I think maybe either for .NET 10 or .NET 11, we actually made those work in a non-allocating way for structs, but I think maybe even with .NET 10 and earlier, they were still allocating, and I'm not sure. I guess I'm wondering how beneficial those overloads actually are.
Depends on how big the span is. If you have,
How big the span is?
yeah, it makes a difference on how big the span is, because when the compare, well, how big the span is and how trivial the comparer is. When you have a large span where the comparer is trivial, and so it's something that would otherwise be inlined if it wasn't indirect, then you end up incurring the overhead of an indirect virtual dispatch per item in the span, which in a lot of cases is quite a lot of overhead. If you want to, for example, do if you end up having a span of, say, int, and you want to customize the comparison for that to do the inverse comparison, effectively reverse the sort order, the logical sort order, you cannot do that for int without it becoming several orders of magnitude more expensive than the base implementation would be.
That's assuming GDV doesn't kick in.
It cannot. The implementation is too big for such cases.
Sorry,
So guarded,
GDB.
wait, why? I don't understand. Why can't PGO and guarded devirtualization kick in? It doesn't require inlining.
No, it doesn't require inlining, but the actual implementation that it would have to guard and duplicate is over the threshold limit for the guarding and duplication.
Really?
Yeah, because you end up having to clone effectively the entire max method for it to kick in.
No, it would just guard the dispatch.
Right, but you have to do that. You either have to do that in the loop, so you're still incurring the overhead of a branch per iteration of the loop.
Right, you'd be incurring a branch per iteration of the loop, but it would be a well-predicted branch.
Only if the max method gets inlined.
No.
Because if it's not inlined, then you're hitting the same body that all iComparers hit. So you wouldn't
No.
delta.
In the max method, the JIT effectively inserts a if T is well known to be this type, or if T comparer is well known to be this type, then inline that call there, else do the virtual call. But that ends up being, it either has to duplicate the loop that contains it, which ends up being a large loop that it has to duplicate, or it ends up doing that dispatch within the loop. And while that is still faster than a virtual dispatch, it is still quite a bit of overhead for something that would otherwise be a singular branch, which is the comparison itself.
Right, but it's not orders of magnitude.
It's my breakfast, kitty. You can have that one.
Regardless, we lack the language support to make this easy to use. Like you can't just use a lambda.
Right. We need to also, for this to be convenient to use, we also need something like functional interfaces in the language. That way you can just use a Lambda and have it bind. But otherwise, this is still only like 3 extra lines of code over the Lambda to make it usable.
So if we think the T comparer one has value, do we need the middle one?
The middle one is for the cases like you have technically no, but it avoids the VM overhead of the generics. So if we were to exclude one because we weren't sure it was ready yet, I would drop the last one from the list and wait for users
But-
to ask for it or for functional interfaces.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but wouldn't all reference type T comparers end up being exactly one instantiated body, which would be exactly what the middle one would be?
That is a bit iffy. It is dependent on runtime implementation details, and while Ryujit currently, while Core CLR canonizes all reference types, other runtimes do not strictly do that. And so they may specialize themselves per T.
Right, but I feel like we said we're getting rid of mono, so
While
is of
mono's
course
not
the
due.
only
There's also Unity's runtime
fair enough.
and potentially other runtimes out there as well.
But we've been saying for 10 years that Unity's like 3 months away from getting onto Core CLRs.
Yeah.
But fair enough.
But yeah, if we were to drop one because of concerns of too many APIs or nicheness, then I would drop the T comparer overload for now.
It
And then
feels in-
maybe we get
yeah.
functional interfaces, and then we go and add such overloads across the entire BCL.
Yeah, my 2 cents would be we don't have it on like I don't know how many compare based overloads we have, but I think it's like 40. I think we have the last one on maybe 2 of them. And those 2 I think were added actually before the vast majority of those compare overloads were added. I would question why we're adding it here and not to the rest. And I would question the value of adding it to all of them. So my preference would be to not have those T compare overloads, but I don't feel super strongly about it. It just strikes me as strange.
All right, you fine leaving him out, Tanner?
Yeah, I'm fine with leaving them out, and then I plan on taking a proposal for functional interfaces to LDM at some point. And then if that happens, we can look at adding such overloads everywhere, because then it will have meaningful impact and be convenient to use.
That's good to me.
Okay.
Do we need
Go ahead, Steve.
ref struct allows ref struct annotations anywhere?
I believe memory extension, no, because you can't have T for T can't be a ref struct because it is in a span, right?
Yeah, read only span of T. T does not allow ref struct.
Right, you're right. What's the reason for the nullable return? That's because the span might be empty.
Yeah. And it's not an index of API.
So on an empty span, it returns default of T.
Yes. The same thing that enumerable.min and max do.
Okay.
Or do we throw? Don't we throw if it's empty on enumerable?
I don't think so. The signature was taken from enumerable dot max t source.
Value is default. If it never moves next, value never gets updated. So, yep, it returns default.
Yeah, for empty.
Really?
Yeah, it throws if it's null, but it returns default if it's empty.
I'm looking at, I see enumerable.min throwing a no elements exception. Which overload are you looking at? Are we looking at?
Enumerable dot max, just the one that takes IEnumerable t source.
Yeah, so min with only a source calls min with a comparer. Min with a comparer. Value is default. Grab the iterator.
Look at one of the parts in lines 302 through 314.
The ones for the specific numeric types.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wonder if those were just being compatible with older types, but
Yeah, those ones seem to do in different implementation from the main one, so that actually seems like it might be wrong.
yeah. So I guess do we think that they should match enumerable.min for numbers, which is probably what somebody's going to use them for here, or for non-numbers?
Because just the raw enumerable.min that takes enumerable of int is calling that same overload and throwing if it's empty.
I see what it is. So the other implementation, the difference is if it's a value type, it throws for no elements because
Right.
it can't return 0 versus can't return default of t.
Right.
Whereas if it is a reference type, it returns null.
Well, if it is any of these specific numeric value types.
No, because
scroll
if you
down
look
more.
on line 318, its special casing value is null.
Oh,
So that's the reference
So-
path.
Yeah,
I
so
see.
reference types return null even if the input is not null. Which seems like it would hit the same bug that the second one is trying to catch. But that's what it does.
okay. So what do we want to do for these?
I chose the signature because I was matching the enumerable signature. So I would think we should match, and so for reference types, mirror the same behavior.
That sounds fair. Yeah, so chat had asked a question related to this, which is like, can we add overloads that take default value so you get your default value instead of a throw on empty?
I think that would be, I think I would say that is out of scope for this proposal and would be a separate proposal that would cover extending enumerable and span simultaneously with that.
The reason you'd want it on span more is it's harder to avoid an allocation unless you want to like stack alloc and shove a default value in there. But no, I think it makes sense to hold off. It seems kind of niche.
I mean, if the point is we're adding them here to make up for a lack of link on span, then I agree this one shouldn't be more feature rich than the span one.
I know we've talked about this in previous meetings, and maybe we even talked about it in this meeting. I'm sorry if I missed it, but why is math soft closed? I was like reading the comments, like the alternative proposal is verboten.
Math is impossible to version correctly and safely. Everything is exposed directly on the scalar type, so you have t.min, t.max, etc. And so if we're exposing new APIs for min and max over span, then we should just expose them like we do for other like for enumerable, just make them normal extensions. The other consideration there is what I got into earlier about the difference between tensor primitives and this API, which is that math and tensor primitives are specifically around the numerical concept of min and max. So nan compares less than everything else. And nan does not compare equal to anything else. So you cannot use it for sorting. You cannot do any of those things. Enumerable and this particular span extension, on the other hand, work with relation to the I-equatable and I-comparable type model, which requires that x equal x. It requires that x sort consistently with regards to x. And so therefore it is usable in hash sets, collection types for sorting algorithms and other things. So we wouldn't want this to be exposed on math anyways, on top of the fact that we can't expose it on math because we cannot version math safely.
Right, and that's due to it being shipped like both is, part of the shared framework and out of band or something.
It's because of implicit conversions.
Yeah.
And particularly specialized implicit conversions that exist for the primitive types or other built-in types, including things like span. So if you have an API that takes double today, and you call math dot, let's say square root 5, and then you expose a new overload that takes float, then instead of calling the overload that took double like it did before, it now silently calls the overload that takes float, reducing the precision implicitly while also simultaneously upcasting implicitly back up to the double that you thought it was going to be. So you have a loss of precision and accuracy silently due to implicit conversion and overload resolution rules.
Right. So it sounds like adding, and in this would be that, like, adding members to the method group is like particularly fraught because of people depend on numerical stability of their operations or whatever. Yeah.
And so math is effectively deprecated. It's never going to change, but we're also not going to add APIs to it. For scalar APIs and for almost any other type, we just do T dot operation for it to be exposed. And we do that via the generic math interfaces and versioning those.
Got it.
And Kevin already answered it in chat, but chat did ask, can we also get these for read-only memory? The answer that was given is memory extensions only overloads for read-only memory in cases that it's going to return a read-only memory. Otherwise, you're expected to go through .span.
Perf-wise, is this going to be the case where if you know that tensor primitives exists and you happen to be using like characters, that this is always going to be slower effectively?
No, this should still be optimized for all the built-in primitive types. But tensor primitives is not doing the same operation for several types. So which you use depends on which behavior you want.
Right, I guess I'm asking more, so if we would duplicate all the fancy logic we do use in tensor primitives here as well.
We're effectively going to duplicate that logic's effectively already duplicated for the types where that's applicable in the enumerable implementation. And so we'd extract the enumerable implementation to here, have the enumerable one defer to memory extensions. There's a long-term plan to try and reduce duplication by exposing a more general purpose set of reusable and composable APIs for doing logic over spans, but that requires a language feature like functional interfaces to make usable.
Sure. What I had in mind more is like I have a span of integers right now, and currently the only API I can call is the tensor primitives one. Now we'll have two options where this one will presumably be slower, although still fastish.
It should have overall the same performance, and if there's a difference between the two, then that's a case of we should improve the algorithm. And we can share code easily internally, even if it ends up duplicated across both binaries. So that'd just be a case of if there is a perf difference for a case that is identical, like int, we should just make sure that they perform identically.
Okay.
Yeah, in fact, this one should outperform the enumerable one because it can vectorize, because it doesn't have to drop through get element or move next rather. Oh no, the tensor primitives obviously isn't using that same IEnumerable approach, but this should improve the performance on the IEnumerables in places where it can get the span. So an input array or a list that it's allowed to reach through, if we wanted to.
Yeah.
All right. So the notes I have on this one, leave out the t-comparer until we have need. Do a follow-up and see what other enumerable members should be copied over. Got some words. And regarding that question mark in the return, it'll behave the same way that enumerable does. I hear no other complaints, so boom. Sold. Ah, that's why I couldn't find that window. All right. Bit array. New constructors to pass a read-only span of t, where t is int, bool, or byte. This is 80263. I assume Tanner.
Yeah, so bit array has overloads that take arrays today. But there's no the way it works when you pass in an array is it functionally creates a copy, and they have the overloads that take an offset and other thing, but if all you have is a span, then there's no way to create a bit array from that span without creating a copy, which then causes the bit array to itself create a copy of that copy. And so, yeah, because we don't have a concept of unsafely take ownership of this array you pass in. And so the solution to that is expose the overloads that take span so that we can just directly operate on the span and copy from that instead of doing the two-step approach.
Reasonable. Yep. The existing ones do copy. Yeah, seems like a pretty obvious overload to me. What does the "so the existing one" comment mean?
I think the user was just indicating it's the existing class.
Gotcha.
Or the interface list.
I don't think the interface list has anything impactful here. We're not changing it. They could have just said public partial class bit array and then the 3.
Yep. All right. Add support for ed 25519, runtime 63174. It's I'll just be amused by saying it. Mr. Jones and me.
Hello. Okay, so this is our second attempt at Ed 25519. Since the original approval, we have drastically rethought how we think about our APIs for signatures. And this is more or less a digital signature version of X25519 that we did a couple weeks ago. So Ed 25519, it works like you'd expect. You have data, you want to sign it. It gives you back a signature. As far as the class goes, again, kind of reiterating how our crypto API designs work now. We don't derive from asymmetric algorithm, just idisposable. They're abstract. The static factory methods return internal implementations, and developers are free to derive from them themselves if they want to create their own implementation. So Ed 25519 is defined by RFC 8032. It is also FIPS 186-5. I think I got the FIPS number right there. As such, it's had its signature size in bytes, private key size in bytes, and public key size in bytes, all defined as consts. So we have 64 for the signature and then 32 for the private and public. For the constructor, it's just the default protected constructor for abstract classes. There's no configuration on Ed 25519, no key sizes, no contexts, no nothing. It's the algorithm. And for is supported, we know this is going to return false on a couple of platforms, notably Windows. So developers can use is supported to decide if the algorithm is available to them or not. And then we move into our static methods for this. This is all generally existing names and nomenclature that we have done on, say, MLDSA X25519. We can generate a key, it returns an instance. There's no inputs because it doesn't need any. Importing a public key, that is the public key size in bytes parameter, like we have for our other algorithms. We just have parameters named source and overload them on byte array versus span. We have the same thing for private key. And then we can export those keys. We have our allocating version, returns an array. We have our span writing ones, it returns void because our new crypto API design is if you're going to give us a buffer to write to, you give us a precisely sized buffer for exporting the public key. So, if you have a span to write to, you need to pre-slice it to public key size in bytes. And then there's the exact same thing for private key. The public ones will defer to the protected abstracts for public and private exports. And then derived implementations will just fill the buffer with the key material wherever it comes from. Okay, so for signing Ed 25519, Ed 25519 works very similarly to MLDSA in that it does pure signatures only. You cannot pre-hash a Ed 25519. So we have signed datas. We do not have things like signed hash that we also have on, say, ECDSA. So in that respect, it's just going to say, give me something to sign and I will give you back the signature. You don't need to pass in a hash algorithm either because Ed25519, I think internally is always going to use, I think, SHA-512, but you don't get to choose. And you cannot specify a prehash. There's nothing like external mu. It's just, I'm going to sign the thing. So our allocating version takes a byte array to sign. It returns a byte array of the signature. Our sign for span will say, give me the span of data to sign, and then it will write it to a destination. Because the signature is a fixed size, destination is expected to be pre-sliced and returns a void. And we have our abstract signed data core, using that core suffix that we use for delegating to derived types. And then we have the logical equivalent for verify. It returns bools to indicate whether the signature is valid or not. That's consistent with, say, ECDSA and MLDSA. I know some other frameworks, would prefer throwing an exception if the signature is invalid, so you can't accidentally ignore the return value, but we return bools. We have our span overload, and then again, our verified data core. And finally, we have our disposes for public void, and then we have our protected virtual, and then we have PKCS8, subject public key info, and their PEM counterparts. Everything from dispose to the end of the class is a direct copy of what we do for doing PKCS8 imports and exports. It's the same for the X255 X25519 that we approved a couple of weeks ago. It's the same for MLDSA. The only difference is the return type, but they just act like static factory methods. The parameter names, the overloads, everything is just identical. So I think we just kind of rubber stamp that. I don't know, if Jeremy, if you would disagree, but
Now, when we did the first of the PQC types, we talked about how this, using Tanner's pseudo generic approval syntax, that this T on all of our types would happen. So,
yeah.
spec sharp,
So
I think is how I refer to his language.
Yeah, so that's all verbatim copied from the X25519 proposal with return types changed. Okay. And finally, we have our Ed25519 OpenSSL implementation. It is a implementation that says, hey, I have an EVP key handle. This might happen if you're opening it from a provider and you want to operate on an OpenSSL handle that you got from somewhere else. It doesn't have any static methods on it because the key handle assumes you already have a existing key. So where it came from, we don't care, but we will let you do all of the sign, verify, and export functionality on it. And then we have our duplicate key handle, all the parameter names, the duplicate, that's consistent with our other OpenSSL suffixed key types. I do have a typo in the constructor that says MLDSA OpenSSL. So we should fix that typo. And there is no CNG one because we cannot implement this on CNG. So the only thing that CNG's implementation would do is say platform not supported exception. So we shouldn't have it right now. If Windows CNG ever gains it, then we will implement it, but Outlook's not looking good on that one.
Enough.
And
And
that's it.
for semi-posterity, our second platform for our rule of two is Android.
That's right. We will be starting with OpenSSL and Android as our platforms of implementation. Again, for posterity, we know Apple has one in CryptoKit. Apple's CryptoKit is not suitable for a very long thread on this issue, but basically CryptoKits doesn't follow NIST's specification. And we don't want to expose non-spec conforming implementations to users.
Does Android use OpenSSL? Will it use the OpenSSL derived class, or is it going to have like a different?
It has a
implementation?
completely different implementation called Conscript.
Okay.
Older Androids used Bounty Castle as their default crypto provider. Google has recently been replacing it, I think, starting in like Android 30 something, maybe high 29 or something, with something called Conscript. Conscript is a Java wrapper around boring SSL.
But notably, we don't have any way right now of operating with a key handle notion on the Android platform, if they even have a notion that they
Right.
get passed to us. So we don't need a dedicated type for it.
But will there be like platform not supported exceptions for every other platform? For this is an entirely new type.
So so is supported will be true on Linux, by which I also mean all the Unixes that aren't otherwise special.
So
So
not
anywhere we
Mac
use
OS.
OpenSSL, it'll be true, and then it'll be true on Android. If is supported as false, all the static methods throw PNSE.
I see, but there's not going to be any kind of compile time. Like we're not going to do like platform nuts or unsupported OS platform.
Yeah,
attribute or
we
anything.
used to do those. The trouble is, like, there are algorithms that we painted as not supported on Mac, and then Apple added support, and so now you would get if you compiled against the .NET 5 targeting pack, it would tell you this doesn't work on Mac when really it does. So instead, we just said for all the crypto things, called it is supported because it can change. It's not a .NET version; it's more about your OS version. So we shouldn't write the stuff down.
The only exception to that are the ones that are specifically designed for a platform. Like OpenSSL will never work on Windows or iOS or OS X. Like we just don't build our runtime that way. So for cases where the answer is never going to change, then we do put unsupported OS platform attributes on them.
Yeah, since this is about interop, and we're
Yeah.
just saying these platforms can't do this interop.
And basically, we use the attributes to say, like, this is how the platform was designed, not what is the platform currently capable of, because that doesn't remain static.
But
And for why we do unsupported on OpenSSL as opposed to why not just say supported on Linux, it's because there's other ones like BSD and such that have different target names. So since Linux isn't really Unix isn't really a closed set, we have to say it's unsupported on all this other stuff as opposed to it's just supported on Linux. That's it. I'm getting pretty good at speedrunning these now.
could be faster. It's the same as MLDSA, except you don't need to talk about a parameter set. Any questions? What's MLDSA? Extra letters there. All right. Other questions, feedback? These are getting pretty cookie cutter, but and then I guess we didn't talk about the name this time. We did previously approve it for reasons it didn't actually ship in the version we previously approved it. But this is in fact the correct casing because it is. It's the first word is just ed. So, but again, posterity. All right. Thank you, Kevin. Think that was the last thing I'd actually put on the agenda. So now we're in an hour of open stuff. The next one up would be add open square bracket try close square bracket parse to rune. Runtime 60231. Tanner, I think I saw your name on this.
Yeah. Not Levi's not in here, but I already talked to him about this as well and made sure that he was fine with it. General concept is we've exposed iParsable and iSpan parsable on many types. We even exposed it on character. Notably in character's case, it is explicitly implemented instead of implicitly implemented. So it's only accessible via the generic context. But then the proposal is effectively, we just expose the same general support for Rune. As you have a string, you may want to get a Rune out, you may want to support that in a generic context. This behaves basically like you would expect it to, with the notes being that iFormat provider is always unused. So it may be desirable to implement the interfaces explicitly and have the public API surface just take in string S. We've done that with other types, but otherwise it's fairly straightforward. It throws if you have too many, if you've got 2 runes in the string as well. Would be the other thing to call out. So same behavior as character if you have a string with 2 characters in it.
But rune will work if you have 2 characters and they're a surrogate pair, I assume.
Yes.
Yeah, I think we were drunk when we did this for char.
Well, we did it for char because char's part of the generic math interfaces and implements all the numeric types because C# implements all the numeric types for it. Like you can do char divided by equals char.
Yeah, well,
that's valid.
So char has public parse and try parse with no format taking string, but they're internal for span. And then they're explicit for the interfaces.
Yeah, which we did because we didn't feel there was a need to make them public on the type.
Yeah. But yeah, I do agree that I feel like our standard stance has been on the types that don't support format providers to explicitly implement the interface and implicitly and then publicly implement it without the argument saying, which is how we communicate. This never matters. Don't pass one.
Yeah.
But we feel that the span versions being public on Rune make more sense than they did for char.
I believe that UTF-8 span parsable is already public. It is implemented.
Okay. I guess, yeah, that one says it does have the interface.
Looks like that one is explicitly implemented. I notably don't have a strong preference myself on if we only explicitly implement and don't expose the public APIs or not. I think it'd be reasonable to tell users just use in generic context and otherwise use one of the explicit decode or get rune enumerator APIs.
Yeah, given that this UTF-8 one is explicit, I think I would say it's at least better to be cautious and be explicit, and then we can add an implicit / public later.
Yeah, and then users have rune.decode from UTF-16, which not only gives them the first rune, but it gives them an operation status saying that was the only rune, or there are more runes. So users have a more powerful API if they're not working in a generic context already.
Okay. So remove all the word public. And do these things. All right. So, yeah. We can come back and add the public versions, but we if we do, we either should add the UTF-8 versions or make a decision why we're not adding the UTF-8 versions.
Yeah.
All right. Any other feedback? Okay. Specify L1 memory usage and hybrid cache 114366. Can anyone talk to this, or should we skip it until we actually inform the person who proposed it?
I think we should wait for Peter.
Okay. I think that'll be true on the next one. Dependency injection empty service provider. It's from Steven, but Stefan, can you talk to
Yeah,
this
I
one?
can represent the Stevens on this, even though I wasn't exactly prepared for it. Yeah, let's do it. So what if you want a service provider that says it doesn't have any services? A lot of people want it for a lot of reasons. And this is that, because a lot of people write these for tests and stuff. I guess we're just calling it empty service provider, which seems fine. The other thing you could consider is like putting it directly on service provider, which I think is public. But I think empty service provider is fine. Because you could do like service provider dot like empty. That would be like an alternative.
Mm-hmm.
That actually sounds more discoverable.
Yeah, I actually probably would prefer that. We you know, if whoever implements it disagrees, we could always send it back.
Yeah, let's see what the...
I honestly don't know that we need a whole public class for it either.
Yeah,
I guess the only difference is if it was on service provider, you'd expect an instance of service provider, which we wouldn't want to use. We would want it to be more empty. So maybe that's why Tobe didn't propose it that way. You can't put it on iService provider.
oh, I see. Service provider is a sealed
Right.
class.
Truth is, like, not many people use the service provider directly. Usually only yeah, actually just not usually much at all. Like, more common is to use the service collection, build service provider, and this is all kind of like hidden from you. I think build service provider returns this, but most people immediately store it in an iService provider field. Yeah, that's correct. So if you do like service collection, build service provider, you'll get a service provider. We could return an empty one, but like I don't think we should. I think we should create a new class. I think it's worth doing. I honestly, I would accept this as proposed. Even though I said the whole thing about service provider, I honestly don't think that's more discoverable. I think this is fine.
Yeah, if service provider weren't sealed, I would say service provider.empty is good, and this should extend service provider and then just close everything down. But given that it is sealed, I can't off the top of my head think of anywhere else that we would have a foo.empty property that doesn't return a foo.
Yeah. And this is fine. Like if the other type was used more in code, I would feel more strongly that we should maybe break that convention, but it's really not used that much. So I think this is fine. And service provider is kind of heavy anyway. So even if it was unsealed, I'm not sure how I would love empty service provider deriving from it just because of all the fields and stuff.
Second time I misspelled proposed. All right. So we discussed the alternative and then said no. All right. Any other comments? Boom. We still have Kevin and Tanner.
If you're looking for ones, I've got one that would unblock something big for Roslyn.
Okay, I'll put that one next.
Yeah.
But since we have the proposer and the only other person who's chimed in on the name, we'll do cryptographic operations. Fixed time is zeros 127584. And hey GitHub, it's failing to fetch data. I don't know what that means.
That's not my problem. I can tell you exactly why that's appearing, and no one will understand the answer. Anyways,
You gotta say it's because we don't have this API.
it actually kind of yes, but it's related to pipelines. And you think like, what do issues have to do with pipelines? It's complicated. Anyways, so in cryptographic operations, we have a existing method called fixed times equals. It is designed to say I have a span of length, a span of bytes, and another span of bytes, and I want to know if they are equal to each other without revealing the contents of one of the spans by timing side channel, meaning it, basically does not short circuit. It doesn't break out of the loop early. It does lots of good stuff to make sure that there's no timing differences in its execution. The only thing that affects how long it takes to run is how long the inputs are, never the contents. But sometimes we want to know, is this thing all zeros? So if you have an input and you want to know, is this thing filled with all zeros? And I want to do it in a side channel free way. The way that you do that is you have your input and then you construct some large number of zeros as your second parameter, say 32. I did 5 in my example. We don't need to do that. We could just say, do this if this is all zeros. I think the only point of contention to discuss was, do we like the name? I don't care. And as an alternative, I don't know if we would prefer doing this for alternative designs. Instead of doing is zeros, we could just say, give me a single element, a scalar to compare it to. So that way you could say, is it all zeros or is it all ones? We can just do that by just subtracting the compare from the input from each element and collecting the bits, but that's neither here nor there. That's the proposal. And now we can spend 57 minutes or 47 minutes talking about the name.
God, I hope not.
Yeah, I think the only thing I had suggested was maybe instead of fixed time is zeros, because there was some we could maybe call it fixed time is all zero. The other thing we could do is clear is explicitly the API we use to set all values to default, so we could use is clear instead, although I'm not sure that's as clear as is all zero. I do like the idea of just a general purpose API, effectively fixed time equals to a t value, and then just checking if every byte is that value.
We don't implement this on T because we cannot guarantee that the way that the implementation will work will always be fixed time. We can guarantee that for bytes. So we won't overload this with like int or long or anything like that. It's bytes. That's the only architecture where we can be assured that this is going to be done constant time.
Our equals is our existing fixed time equals is just byte to byte.
But sure, but just, fixed time equals byte value, and then it checks for that value. Seems like it would also be a reasonable name and covers the case of, well, what if I wanted to check for all bit set or any other pattern?
That's actually a better example than is all ones, is all bit set, like 255. So that works for me too.
I mean, it certainly solves the naming problem.
Yeah.
But yeah, I do think I want to say in RSA PKCS padding, there's a block that's supposed to be all Fs, and so presumably we could use this there. I think there's a bunch of Fs. I could be wrong. All right, so if we are going the route of the second suggestion, so Tanner said value.
Compare doesn't sound right because that's what we use for the thing that's doing the comparison.
Yeah.
I totally just put a word there. That is not a real suggestion at all. Comprehend? I don't know.
So comprehend is a valid word. But what do you call it in the vector? Go project this vector into a scalar. Just value, I assume?
Yeah, I think it's just value. And I believe that's what we used for tensor primitives as well, because tensor primitives has all the APIs of we use there we often use left and right explicitly.
Yeah, we have left and right for the existing fixed time equals because they have to be equal length, so it's
it feels like it still makes sense if you do left and right because you're just implicitly broadcasting without allocating. But you could also call it right scalar, right comprehend, or I'm not picky about the name. I think all of those are acceptable.
okay.
Comprehend value, scalar,
And then
right scalar.
And then it's a span input, so presumably we should call it source.
Yeah.
It doesn't super duper matter, but that.
Yeah, looks good to me.
Okay.
This is the worst bike shedding session ever. We got it done in like 5 minutes.
I don't know if that means we're
Is the
getting better or
method-
worse. Go ahead.
Is the method impl that's only an implementation detail now? Or do we care about that for public API surface?
Some attributes we care about, some we don't. For API proposal, I just put it there. Because
yeah,
it affects
Right.
it does appear in the ref source, so I don't know.
yeah.
And
The
in this case, I think it is important for users to understand it has to be implemented in a way that a compiler cannot look at the IL and decide, oh, I can just call memcomp instead.
yeah. So the no opt. Again, whether or not it actually matters for the API approval, but the no opt is don't think you can know a faster trick runtime, and then at least it used to be the case that if you said no opt, you had to say no inlining because the inliner wouldn't take no opt as no inlining, and then it could opt when it inlined it, it would lose the no opt, and then this at least was true back in the days of like Framework 3.5.
I think that is still true.
Yeah, somebody suggested, so Igor said no opt implies no inline for core CLR, but
Yeah.
we may as well be explicit. And then I think we can vectorize this one because the vector won't leak it wouldn't leak a timing signal based on content unless for some reason vector subtraction does, which would be absurd.
You can vectorize on some platforms, but you have to explicitly check the platform and you have to explicitly know the data is aligned, because split cache lines make it non-constant otherwise, non-fixed time.
Meaning it would vary by the data, or just it would vary by the address.
It would vary by the address, but then the length of the data may be unknown as well. You might not necessarily know where in it is, but it gets a little bit wonky on x86 because of how data dependent cache line splits work. And theoretically, a cache line split can evaluate part of the vector and predict a next statement
Fair enough.
versus not. But if it's aligned, then you know there is no cache line split, and you know it is atomic on AVX and higher. So therefore, you know that it does not vary in time.
Let's just implement it the dumb way, Kevin.
Yeah, I don't think we even bother with the existing equals, right?
We-
It's just super
We
slow.
don't. No, we don't. And I'm reading an Intel doc that says like you really shouldn't do this.
Yeah,
Yep.
they have some newer instructions that allow you to actually disable speculative execution within a region of code. But those are also advanced APIs, and I doubt that it's strictly needed here.
Yeah, I mean, for the most part, the values being passed into these things are like 32 bytes, at which point
Mhm.
warming up the Y registers probably wasn't even worth it. So
It looks like Intel has a specific like instruction set modification called do it, data operand independent timing that you
Yep.
need to turn on.
I'm
Slow
going
and
with a whiff
boring way
5
it
to that
is.
guy. Yep. Slow and boring is the predictable that we want in this API. All right. Well, see, I tried to care about performance, but I care about security more. All right. What's your sacrificial lamb, Tanner?
It's 97570. So for this one, the gist is that when working with source generators, you frequently end up having to use basically the way you work with source generators, fixers, and other things with Roslyn is you don't really work on the AST for the thing that you're producing. You just produce text. And in order to produce that text, you frequently are using a string builder. This is how like library import generator, regex source generator, all of them work by having a string builder. Now, that's all fine and great, but then when you need to give it to Roslyn, Roslyn ends up having to create a copy and materialize the string, which causes a lot of extra and unnecessary work. It's allocation heavy, hurts perf. So Jeremy K originally proposed an API that would expose the backing chunks of the string builder via read-only sequence. And I pushed back against that because we don't want to move read-only sequence down into corelib. That's a very heavy dependency and other things. I talked through them I talked both with Jeremy and Joseph, who's on C# LDM, about some of the other things like does enumerate chunks, which string builder already exposes, serve this purpose because it gives the read-only memory. The answer to it was basically no, because a user could still mutate the string builder and modify the backing memory for the chunks they're enumerating. So it doesn't give the immutability model of Roslyn the guarantee. What would end up filling their need without requiring us to take a dependency on read-only sequence is if we just exposed a new API, move chunks to string builder. Name is up for discussion, but we already have chunks exposed as a term on string builder. We have the move terminology as it's used in the immutable collection types, and we're specifying to a string builder. So what this API does is it effectively creates a new string builder, takes all the backing chunks from the existing string builder, moves them into the new string builder, which effectively clears the current string builder. This means that you are effectively flushing all of the data out of the string builder into this new string builder, making the new string builder the only alias to that data, which makes the only mutable alias to that data. So it gives whoever calls this API a strong guarantee that outside of unsafe code, no one else can be mutating the backing data now. So Roslyn can simply call move chunks to string builder and cache the string builder in their source text wrapper over string builder and not have to worry about any of the mutations on it, allowing them to avoid the copy, avoid the materialization of the string, etc.
Okay, so this isn't about compacting it. It's about
Correct.
removing the caller now gets a no one but me can modify this data.
Correct. It's about removing the aliases to the backing data store, which is chunks.
Is that true though?
Yes, because we do not have any API that exposes a mutable way to access the backing chunks. We only have the get chunks enumerator, which gives the read-only memory access to it.
Okay, and you're saying that casting away the read-onliness of read-only memory is
dangerous.
Is within the set of things that are declared out of bounds enough that they're not a concern.
Yes, and in the unsafe evolution feature where we annotate APIs such that callers must be in an unsafe context to use them, memory marshal as memory, which strips the read-only from read-only memory, will be such caller unsafe.
Right. And then the other option would be you get a byte star from it, but then you had to be an unsafe anyway.
Yeah.
Okay. So the name is terrible. Because originally I was thinking it was about compacting it into a single buffer, and then that would be like compact and clear.
Yeah.
But it's not about compacting; it's about removing mutability.
Yeah, it's literally about moving the data from one builder to the other builder.
So it's basically like a copy on write clone kind of thing. Am I understanding this correctly?
It's not a copy on write clone.
Okay.
The original builder no longer has reference to the data. It's effectively cleared.
Yeah.
Oh, you are just clearing it.
Yeah. So
Okay.
the original the instance that this gets called on now says length is 0.
Yeah,
Okay.
so it behaves identically to immutable array builder move to immutable in that regard. The builder the original builder becomes clear. The new object contains the data that the original builder had. The difference being that immutable array builder has both move to immutable and drain to immutable, where move only moves the data and drain either moves the data or clones the data if the lengths don't match. But there's no draining possible here because the length will always match.
Well, because in fact, drain is the verb that I was wondering here, and that like we could just say string builder.drain.
I do like move though. Like if that's what it's doing, it kind of reminds me of like move semantics in C++. And I'm not a C++ guy, so maybe I'm wrong. But I know it's a little different. But like you can't use it in the original place, and you can use it in the new place.
Yeah, and that's so. During it was like a 4-hour discussion where we were talking through this and names and everything. Drain chunks to string builder was the other name that came up, and and there's a note at the bottom of this. We decided not with that as the primary because of the difference in behavior and guarantees in the immutable array builder case, where drain implies a copy may be made, whereas move guarantees no copy will be made. And in this case, there is no copy of the data being made. It is strictly being moved. And so move matches the exact guarantees we want here using existing terms.
Yeah, and I think move implies not copy just as much as drain does. I think they're both fine.
I feel like the move versus drain is really about immutable collections, and I don't know that we want to spread that to more fundamental types.
The move terminology?
The only place I know that we've used it is in immutable collections.
Right. I think that's the only place we've needed it so far because that's the only place we have such builder types.
Mm-hmm. I don't mind expanding the use of move here. It's not. I mean, it's like moving a file and all that to some extent.
Yeah, it's just like the move. So the builder move to immutable. That's like the to immutable is saying on there. The builder itself is mutable, and you want back the immutable version of this, and you've done the move. The part where drain was move the data, aka sometimes clear, and was sometimes copy or whatever. That was
really jank is that
weirdism.
It's the same type. Like I get
Yeah.
they're trying to make it safer, but it's like, can we just like make it a ref and null it out? But then it's like, oh, someone might have another reference. It's just like it's really weird. They should maybe just write their own type for this. It's like very niche. Like, is anyone other than Roslyn gonna use it?
For string builder?
Yeah. Like because it's like
there's...
to another string builder. Like it's not even from a builder type to a different type. It's just from one string builder to another. It's just like this weird, like because we want to be safe at this API barrier and we don't want to define our own types for our own API, we want to reuse string builder. Like I don't know.
I mean, this can be used for basically any logger in the world where they're building a temporary interpolation buffer, and then they want to flush it dynamically.
But we could
Um,
also like, I guess, why is this better than putting a lock method on string builder?
Right.
Because because that will end up violating expectations of other users that hold the builder. What you want to do is you want to say, I want to get the data for this, but be the only owner of the data for it.
So in the difference between lock and clear, well, in this, right, is if we lock any new operations on the old reference, basically will fail. And if we clear, you can use it again.
You can still call it pinned, but you don't have your data anymore. Yeah.
Right.
Well,
Like,
you
why not
don't-
just create a new string builder at that point?
So you don't know who else has the string builder. You could have any number of people that have a reference to that string
And then you're
builder.
just going to clear it for all of them, even though you don't know who has it?
Yeah, because it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter who has it for an operation like clear. They can still append and do other operations with it.
They
It
could
doesn't
also
matter.
they could also inspect it, but they can't
Right.
anymore because you stole the content out.
Yeah, but anyone can always do that. That's not the thing. That's not the consideration for
Locking
ownership of
seems
data.
safer if you have multiple users that you're not coordinating with.
But
Like,
then
it's
but
very
then they
clear that
will-
you should be coordinating with them.
But then they will throw, and you no longer have the guarantee of ownership. This is very much a ownership and memory safety semantic where locking does not fit.
Right,
you
but
have
does
to-
string builder need it? Like, well, locking kind of fits.
No, locking does not handle the ownership consideration of I need to be the only owner of this data.
If you lock it, then
If you lock
Then
it, then no one
anyone-
owns it.
Yeah, if you lock it, then anyone else who has an alias will now throw. So it becomes a breaking change to do. So Roslyn cannot do it safely.
So what is Roslyn doing now? They're clearing it. So
They-
this
no.
seems like, so it is just for Roslyn. So since Roslyn already exposed an API that clears the string builder, they want to do it more efficiently.
No, they don't clear the string builder. They
Oh,
call
so it's a
to
breaking
string.
change anyway.
No, they call to string.
Yeah, but changing to call this method is a runtime
Exactly.
breaking change. It's
Yes, you clear
No,
it.
no, it's not because to string doesn't clear the builder.
But
that's
this
no,
does
that's
what
why
you
this
say.
becomes a breaking change. If I passed it to Roslyn and then logged it, you've now changed my log message.
Exactly. It'd be so much better if it throws. Like, that's less breaking. At least you know.
No,
Yeah.
that's not breaking. That's a behavioral change. And
They're all
anyone-
behavioral changes.
Yes, but there's a difference in the behavioral change and the guarantees that you can provide to other users, such as they can continue using the builder versus they cannot.
Right, but if
They shouldn't be allowed to if you're breaking them.
If you're
we should
using a
make it as
Roslyn-
breaking as possible.
API right now and you've built a string builder and you pass it in, then you can have the order that you called Roslyn and then you did something else with your string builder, assuming the text was in it. Roslyn changing to call this will change the data flow of the caller, which is, in my opinion, worse than the caller getting an exception. Because getting an exception means they upgraded the Roslyn library, it smacked them in the face and tells them they need to react to this. If it's subtle,
That was
They don't know they
already
react to
not,
this.
That was already not safe for the original person to assume of because any downstream consumer could have done insert to a random position, clear, etc. The consideration is ownership, not about what the contents of the builder are. Because assuming the contents of the builder after it's been passed to someone else is never safe.
yes,
There-
but once it works, you
Sure.
assume it's going to continue working.
Exactly.
But
Any
that is
observable
a bug.
behavior really depended on, especially like with the state of a string.
This is a concept of memory safety, not logic bugs.
Well, I mean, the throwing should be memory safe.
No, because that breaks the contract that was already there.
But it's a logic bug, just like
no,
the other stuff.
No, that's not a logic bug because a user is a user with correct safe code was in a situation where they could always mutate the string builder before. and now you're changing it so that they can
But might have had a
potentially
logic bug if they didn't pay attention to whether there was data there or not. And are
ignoring
completely
logic
fine.
bugs, because logic bugs are bugs that
Fine, so
users
there's
have
no
to
memory
fix in their
bugs,
code. No,
but there
there
could be
is a
logic bugs.
memory bug.
Yeah.
In that you no longer know who owns the data, so Roslyn cannot take a dependency on it.
I still don't see
And
how
not
throwing
just
turns it
Roslyn,
into a
but
memory
any
bug.
logger, because you're changing the contract of String Builder fundamentally. String Builder today has a contract of anyone who has the String Builder can mutate the String Builder at any time. Anyone can mutate it if they have an alias to it. If you suddenly add a lock API, now all code that was assuming the existing contract was correct now is broken because they have to assume I may not be able to mutate the data.
Legitimate question. I assume the answer is no, but I don't know this. Like, is String Builder thread safe?
I'm not sure if
I
it's
assume not.
I assume not, right? Like, and at a certain point, like whether or not it's memory safe, like you expect a certain amount of coordination, and throwing does not make it less memory safe.
No,
It
no.
just adds new potential logic bugs.
Throwing breaks the existing contract.
So does everything else.
No,
Like,
no.
it's just what you
No, you're
consider
not
worthy of
changing
the calling the contract. You,
No.
you only think the only contract is memory safety, and I disagree.
There is the contract of the type, and there is the assumptions that a user may be making of downstream consumers. String Builder as a type does not have a way to prevent you from writing to it today. So the contract is it can always be written. It can always be extended, mutated, etc. That is the contract of String Builder today. So if you have a String Builder, you never had to do a check of if is read only. It is different from iList. iList has since v1 had an is read only property. So therefore, if you take an iList, you are expected by contract of the type to check if it is read only or not.
Yeah, I mean, as someone who's worked on like iService provider and stuff, being like, oh, this thing that like could have never thrown before can throw now if we don't think that, like, if the only way it would throw is if new code put it into the throwing state, I'm not scared, for one. It's just not that scary. And also in Roslyn, like, they're gonna have to make a breaking change anyway to use this API, and they're like the only ones I know who want to use it.
They're not the only ones that are going to want to use it. This is valid for almost any logger or other similar pattern in the
If
world.
they want to make a breaking change, which
No, that's not a breaking change to the existing.
but they don't
contract
clear
of the type.
today. All right.
Like, I believe so. If I knew of BCL code, Roslyn's not the BCL. If I knew of BCL code that was going to start calling this method when it used to only call toString, I would say a breaking change notification needs to be put up, because you are violating the gentleman's agreement that if you didn't mutate the data in V1, you're not allowed to mutate the data in V2. I don't know where in the formal memory model gentleman's agreement works out, but Roslyn will be changing basic assumptions that when you test something and you move to a newer version, that it will behave in a similar manner.
Roslyn won't necessarily be doing it implicitly. The source generator will be handing the builder off to Roslyn or creating the source text wrapper themselves. But the consideration here is that it becomes an ownership correctness. So it becomes a consideration of, I'm not breaking the contract of the type. You could theoretically be making a behavioral change to your own API's contract on whether or not it makes a mutation. But then that is a consideration for each downstream user to make a claim around.
Okay, so you're saying Roslyn is not going to call this method that the generators no, because the call needs to be inside Roslyn, or it needs to be at least inside source text.
My whole point, Tanner. Like, my whole point is that we know of one customer. Maybe any logger could use it, but so far it's only like Roslyn already exposes string builder parameters in their public API, and because of this, they want new APIs on string builder, and they're willing to make a breaking change, maybe, which. Fine, but if like the only person who's willing to do this has to make a breaking change anyway, why not just use a new type?
Okay, so
like this is like really weird.
One, this is not Roslyn specifically who's asking for this. This is people who are writing source generators, including the source generators we are shipping out of the BCL, like the regex text source generator and the library import source generator. So we have people on our team that are asking for this because of the expense of Roslyn of taking the string builder and handing it off to Roslyn safely today. We can make that safe for Roslyn because Roslyn has types that can wrap string builder. We can make that all safe if we have this API because we can produce the wrapped source text over the string builder, knowing that the only owner of that string builder is now Roslyn, and can hand it off to them. But it is explicitly the nuance here is the difference between what is the contract of the type. So we can't do lock APIs because that breaks the existing contract of string builder for everyone. We can expose an API like this because it doesn't break the contract of the type. It only potentially makes a breaking change for users to start using it if it changes the contract they guaranteed of their own APIs. But that becomes a consideration of all the downstream users deciding to use it.
I just don't agree that we can't do lock.
I think the
sure,
distinction
break-
that I'm missing, and let's see if it helps sway Stefan, is this drain from API, as it suggests here, is not current Roslyn. So it's not Roslyn will change to call this method. It's the source generator will change to call this method and say, I know that when I'm giving you this text that it is being erased, but that's fine.
So this is a new API in Roslyn that explicitly drains.
That the generator opts into doing as the sole owner of the string builder.
But that gets to my new thing. Like, why not just take like a different type? Like this seems, I don't know. It seems weird.
Well,
Because
maybe it's
there's
fine.
no other way to build text efficiently in .NET other than string builder.
Right. I mean, I get that, like, you know, it could be a struct that has a string builder or something. Like it's a
Like-
Roslyn thing.
It's
So I
also
guess
things like interpolated string handlers could use this API to more efficiently do things behind the scenes. Like this has a lot of power because string builder is the thing that powers a lot of implicit perf features throughout .NET.
all right. I mean, yeah.
yeah,
I don't want to block a perf scenario. That's fair. If this is the only way to do what we need to efficiently, it is weird. Just the pattern matching. It's just like having a class that has a move to another instance of the same class. Feels like we haven't needed that for other things.
Yeah.
And it just
I
makes me
mean,
wonder if there's an
we
alternative.
also don't have very
Don't-
many other builders. So
That's
Yeah.
true.
And I imagine as we finish Unsafe Evolution V1, which is starting with unsafe callers, and we start looking at other issues in the memory safety realm that we know have problems, like ownership semantics, i.e. why array pool is dangerous and unsafe today, we will start seeing more move APIs and likely even language move semantics in the future.
I will say, like, string builders already not thread safe and stuff. So there's definitely a certain amount of like coordination, like multiple consumers of string builder need. Like just because you could like always write to it, like doesn't mean that's like
Yeah,
logic bugs often matter too. Like you do need
Yeah.
coordination, but
The logic bugs do matter too, but they are on a different level than the other billion-dollar mistake, which is memory safety.
yeah, the fact. So I still stand by my previous. If you were calling toString and you change to calling this, that is a breaking change. But if the idea is that new API can be written that utilizes this, and or it's only ever utilized by somebody who has not received a caller provided string builder, then the scenario I guess makes more sense.
yeah, I mean, we're just saying this is the best way to efficiently extract data out of a string builder that's like temp buffer kind of thing. In that, yeah. All right. And we want to call that move chunks to string builder. Like, it seems weird that there's no better way to do this. But yeah.
I mean, there's not really a way to. We don't have an API to do it today, and we don't have any API to guarantee ownership of the chunks. We theoretically could expose the chunks and the concepts
Right.
of the chunks directly via string builder, but that is a much more complex and involved API than this.
Right, like you'd have to like basically the alternative would be like a move constructor of some sort that exposes the chunks. And
How
then-
does anyone feel about the name move to clone?
well, it's not a clone. It's very
It
much
is a
not a clone. Like it's not. Well, it's like the shallowest of clones.
No, but in this, it is actually the implementation would be indistinguishable, aside from the fact that somebody can hold on the read-only memory of where the buffers are. The implementation is indistinguishable from the implementation being written as clone, clear, and return the clone.
You're talking about wait, clone on string builder. Well, yes, except for the perf part of it.
Right.
Yeah,
But
yeah. But
so
like,
the
that's the whole reason
but-
Tanner didn't want to call it drain. I would prefer drain if we're not.
well,
worried
I'm
about
just like
implying
I'm
that
trying to
it's
avoid
copied.
the two and then the same type. It's clone is already a verb noun for be the same kind of thing, and then we can drop the chunks because we're just saying string builder move to clone. So clone yourself, move all your data over, and then because we said move, it means the data's all erased. Like it just feels like a much more compact way of saying this paragraph.
I'm-
prefer drain over clone. Clone, I think, too heavily implies copy, which is like a big thing you're trying to avoid.
Yeah,
with this
I'm
API.
personally completely fine with the entire method being named drain.
Yeah, I'm okay with drain at this point. I know it's like kind of against it initially.
I
but-
don't like clone for many reasons, including doesn't cover shallow versus deep. It doesn't cover whether it doesn't strictly cover whether the data is still aliased or not. Specifically because it's the word clone, I think is what puts in that ambiguity. I'm fine with drain. I don't like just drain though. Drain, I'm still more in preference for move because of the semantics of drain on the other types, and specifically because drain could imply compaction. Whereas move chunks very explicitly covers the concept of we're moving the data, and specifically we're moving the chunks, which is an existing term and concept we exposed from string builder, and it explicitly specifies what we're moving it to. And we've notably on the builder types, we've hit issues with users with move to immutable and just to immutable because of all the extensions we have, like to immutable array. So users end up seeing to immutable and to immutable array next to each other. They end up picking to immutable array, which is the link extension method, and it's less efficient than the API they should have chosen. So this is one of those cases where trying to be terse is likely to detriment to the API.
Sorry, I don't follow. Like, what? Like, I don't see this as like too immutable. I don't see the analogy. What's wrong with train?
Just calling it drain, I think, leaves too much on the table, such as is compaction occurring? Because that's one of the things that the immutable array drain can do, is it may end up copying the data because the backing buffer was bigger than the number of elements that were
But this isn't
in
drain
applied
2, it's
unit.
drain.
right, but that still could imply compaction.
It could. Move
should
chunks to
say
string
it.
builder could imply compaction.
No,
Yeah,
that's specifically move.
I mean, if in the future people want compaction, which I mean, I don't think we'll ever
Uh,
do, it would be like
when-
drain and compact. Like,
when
who
you
cares?
move a file from one volume to another instead of just one directory to another, it usually compacts any defragmentation that you have. Move can compact.
Back before SSDs and
Like-
trims when they actually, yeah, maybe.
think
Oh,
that's
actually,
a-
automatically during a move it would probably happen even with SSDs. Yeah,
Yeah.
you're probably right.
I'm just
I
like,
think that's a file IO consideration and not a move nomenclature as we've used in our other builders nomenclature.
Right, I'm
For
just-
once, I'm with Jeremy. He's actually arguing for the short name, and I am gonna I am sticking to this argument.
For once, I'm
you
with
can have
Jeremy.
your
I
API,
feel
Tanner. You convinced me, but we should call it drain.
I honestly think Drain is like the worst API. Just Drain is the worst API. Drain chunks to string builder would be okay.
I really hate the two string builder.
Me too.
I hate it. Move chunks if you want that to be the ugly name, fine.
But except for we don't expose the chunks, right? On string
We have
builder.
a chunk enumerator.
I think just move
Alright.
chunks would be fine.
Move chunks is fine then.
I
We
still
have
think
chunk
that
and
violates our concept of what is it moving to in case we need to expose others in the future.
That's fine.
But-
The other stuff will have the two. If in the future we add it.
No, because so if we had move, like if we're moving it into a receiver, then it would be specified by parameter, and if we end up coming up with some other kind of clone holder thing, then yeah, now we need to suffix it. But move chunks doesn't need the two blank because it's to yourself. So
I agree with that.
because it's really to self, not self being the instance, but self being the type. And
And I assume like we don't want the drain to take the second stream builder as a parameter because they're trying to like align the constructor and all that.
There's a lot of other concepts you get into if you take another string builder, such as what if it's not empty?
Yeah, okay, yeah. And there's just a lot more things you could do. All right.
other string train from. All right. Chat suggested static, though I don't know that really helps. We'd still have to move it, or sorry, we'd still have to name it, which is the part we're disagreeing on. So
Looking at it, I actually don't hate clone and clear.
I really hate the term clone because of how ambiguous it is throughout .NET. We've rejected it a lot of times on a lot of other APIs.
Clone reminds me of that old like what binary serializer or whatever. I don't know.
Yeah, so
I don't like it.
So I know we've added it in a lot of places in crypto. So back before Swilina decided he was too good for this meeting, he had the opinion that clone is a well understood verb. The iClonable interface was the devil, and we should never use that. So we've definitely, in the time I've been on .NET, added methods named clone, but we've never added a thing as iClonable.
And that's fair, but like yeah, I agree with Tanner. Like clone implies too much that you're like copying the bytes, in my opinion. Even if you're not.
Because all that clone, and so Christoph's point back then was like, this isn't iClonable clone. This is a local method clone. Read the docs to see what it says. If we think that's not matching what he wrote in the book of a self-descriptive framework, then fair enough. But I don't hate the word clone just because it's clone, though I did until he gave the argument of it's only iClonable clone that's bad. But of all of these, I personally will take the damning with faint praise that I can get from Stefan. I like the shortest name here, but failing that, yeah, my rank is probably drain, then clone and clear, then move chunks, then naming it a name of bashing on the keyboard, and then finally move chunks to string builder.
You
So-
basically have it in the order of my preference right now.
Mine would be move chunks and otherwise string builder drain from as static.
So you like drain from, but not drain?
Not just drain.
I'm fine with the static drain from. Honestly, I would actually put that third after drain and move chunks in my ordering.
I like it better than move chunks with no suffix.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't have a huge preference between 2 and 3.
Hold on, wait. I can YouTube like a professional. Let us know in the comments. Like right now. Because drain is the verb that I initially was latching onto. So if drain from gets me drain, it also makes it a niche scenario. I don't think it covers, as chat's just pointing out, I don't think it covers your question of does it guarantee that compaction's not happening? But I also don't think move doesn't guarantee compaction's not happening.
I think move strictly guarantees it because it's a move. That's what it's kind of like as versus to, where as implies no change, move implies there is no change.
I
and
think
that-
move is slightly stronger and is slightly stronger, not much stronger, in implying that there's no change. I hear you, Tanner. I don't think it's like as clear cut. I think move often involves some changing as long as it's like the same canonically.
I feel like chat just voted for everything. and then we got an extra write-in of steel.
Because we decide we're being mean when we're draining. It's
Though,
like,
though steel feels like the receiver's wrong, so it would have. I think that would actually be a static. Because input is being stolen; it's not stealing. So
yeah, I don't particularly like steel. I kind of get it. It's like, oh, it was originally meant for someone else, maybe, but yeah, I think it's just too much.
take
I
all
mean,
isn't terrible.
From the outside looking in and being somebody that has zero opinion about any of this, clone and clear is the only one that I read and actually understand what it does from the name.
That's an interesting point. Yeah, like if you don't care about the perf implications at all, you just care about the behavior. Clone just sounds like a synonym to copy to me. Like it might as well be called copy and clear to me. I get that it's not. It's not exactly the same.
Yeah, because there's the reason I don't like clone is there's too much nuance onto the depth of that clone, and it makes an impact on things like if I have a read-only memory to the backing chunks, which you can do via get chunks, then it makes a difference on whether clone has copied the chunks or whether it has moved the chunks using the official move versus copy semantics that most languages follow when they're using those terminology. Then it makes a difference on whether the read-only memory you have still tracks the original chunk, whether those chunks can be mutated via the original builder or the new builder. And that's very ambiguous. And I think that's more ambiguous than drain from, where we can at least document where drain at least has the potential to move, and we can document for string builder it always moves. And so I think that if people are against the terminology that actually says via normal language semantic rules of move versus copy that it moves, then I think drain at least is the next best fit.
I honestly think they're all fine. I think truth is if we're trying to communicate like everything the method does in its totality, like that it does this, but it's non-copying bytes, like, you know, we're never gonna get it right. I think drain is clear enough. I think clone and clear might be a little misleading on the perf characteristics, but it's like more straightforward to just read the name and know what it does functionally.
Yeah,
But
though
I think drain's pretty easy too, honestly, once you see it once.
yeah, I think clone and clear is extraordinarily transparent in the functional flow, but I think anybody who's thinking about performance would say that's got to be the worst possible way you could have done this thing. They would just, why don't I just call new string builder of input? Why would I bother clearing the input? So while it does provide clarity, I think it's probably going to be a bad name because it just says don't call me.
Yeah, I mean that's kind of how I feel, but even that's not the worst. I think, you know, Tanner made a compelling point, even though I was kind of against this API to begin with. But I'm like, yeah, let's approve something.
Yeah, I think drain from might as a static might even be slightly above move chunks as an instance, because I think move chunks as an instance is too unclear, whereas move chunks to string builder as an instance is more clear. But I think string builder drain from or string builder move chunks as a static, if we use the short name, is more clear. So
Yeah,
if you
my
want
vote,
to
I
use
think.
drain, then the static drain from.
Yeah, I like both the static methods. Probably drain from a little better. I like drain too, but the static drain from is not bad.
All right. Any strong objection to static string builder drain from?
Only a weak objection that move feels better.
So Tanner and Mia are both team move chunks, and Jeremy and I are both team drain from. I can go move chunks.
Well,
I'm fine with move chunks. I think drain from looks better, but I can understand an argument that maybe we'll start having more methods called move in the next couple years.
That's
Yeah,
exactly how I feel. Yeah.
I think once we finish the current unsafe evolution and we start looking at ownership semantics in the language, we are going to start getting more move APIs throughout .NET, and that will likely be impactful to the naming and centralizing move to explicitly mean the common language concept of move. Just like we're standardizing unsafe to explicitly mean memory unsafety and not other types of unsafety.
The only thing that makes move a little weird to me compared to like maybe not C++, but just like files, right? Is like when I move a file, the old file is gone. It's not empty, it's gone. Whereas draining, you know, it feels more like draining, right? Because like the object's still there, it's just empty now. And then the content's moved. So yeah, I mean that's why I like drain, is because like the original thing's just there, it's just empty.
Right. Well, and that's kind of the thing. That's kind of the concept this is relaying here, which is you're not moving the builder. You're moving the chunks in the builder. So the chunks are gone, but the builder is still there.
Okay. Yeah, like I said, I'm fine with both.
Yeah,
But
string
it's a
builder
slight preference towards drain.
string builder dot move I think would be weird, but move chunks saying that you're stealing its guts is
All right. Move chunks it is. I think that's where we were reaching agreement. So let's go with it.
alrighty.
I thought this one was actually going to be like a shorter issue.
This is
Well,
the
little
bike
did you
shedding
know
I
you'd have
came
to
for.
first convince us that it is necessary.
This is where all the bike shedding got moved to.
Yeah, of course. And then the long naming discussion.
Or did the bike shedding get drained to this issue?
Yes. The drain was clogged.
I'm glad we didn't call it Move Chunks to String Builder though. I don't know if it was worth all the time, but it is a better name.
Source.
Yeah,
All right.
seems reasonable.
All right. Frederick comments in chat. Static move chunks is unclear about source and destination. Drain from is very clear for the direction, but it couldn't move any other way. It's allocating
If
a
it
new
weren't
string
a
builder.
return value, I would agree. But yeah, I thought the same thing.
Yeah, you're saying move to a new instance by doing the static string builder because it can't work any other way.
Yeah.
It is a little bit weird to have move without a destination, but whatever. It's probably weird to have drain without a destination. It's implied. It's a return value.
Yeah, and and we certainly can handle local. So I guess I'll bring it up right now and see if we want to add it. Do we want? That's void.
Not yet. That's what Tanner said.
Yeah,
It's
so
complicated.
that one gets complicated because if destination is non-empty, then
Gotcha.
you need to decide is it
Is it appending or
throwing-
replacing? Yeah.
Yeah,
throwing.
is it throwing, replacing, appending, prepending, etc. And it's possible we might want such an API. We would just
For
need
object pooling.
to
Yeah.
solve those other questions.
Yeah, we don't need to do it immediately, but I could totally see. I mean, people are already asking in YouTube chat, obviously.
hmm
Um,
I had to step out for a couple of minutes. Do I want to ask why this is static instead of instance and have no parameters?
it felt right.
It felt
It's
right.
kind of like an alternative constructor. No, seriously, like it's a little bit like a move constructor, but we don't want to just do like a move constructor, obviously.
It also hides it so not everyone doing builder
Yeah.
dot sees it.
I like it. I don't know if we actually discussed it out loud a lot. I think someone just suggested it and we were all like, oh, that looks kind of good.
Yeah, we went from static drain from to somebody said static move chunks. We duplicated the line and then that's the one that we liked. So all right. Partial. Are we content enough?
I'm content enough.
I'll
Yep.
explicitly say
I
move
think-
chunks instead of move so people aren't confused.
Multiple source generator authors are going to be very happy and will make the regex and the library import ones much more efficient from this.
Yeah, I do see why it's useful as much as I pushed back at the beginning. Like it's, yeah.
Yep. This does have, I will say, just of the thing of string builders and contracts express and implied. Calling this on a thing that somebody has been saving in a pool undoes their pooling, because the reason you put it in a pool is so that you get to reuse ones that have already allocated bigger buffers. But this steals the buffers out of them. So,
Right.
but again, this should only be used in API that's being intentional about it, not just used willy-nilly instead of two-string.
That is interesting though. Like compared to something that was doing string builder pooling and that just required coordination, which is like, hey, don't use it until I'm done with it, and somehow, could be more efficient, for sure.
But all right. With that, we're only 12 minutes over. Or
But the point is, you could always do something like this less efficiently. So we're not
Yeah.
unlocking anything truly new from like an API developer's perspective, other than making this a little faster, maybe. And I think that's probably your main point, Tanner, right? So anyway,
Yeah, it becomes a consumer consideration of whether it is correct or not for their own API's contracts.
yeah.
Yep.
And then this default string builder have a capacity?
Yes.
Or-
You have the capacity and the known length of the
No,
builder
but like
for-
if you say new string builder, does capacity say 0 until you do something, or does it say
I think you can even specify an initial capacity.
you can. The default, I think, is 0.
Thought it was like
Oh, never mind.
16 or
Math.min
something.
16. Just kidding.
Yeah.
because really the question is what state is move chunks going to leave the drainy?
We will
I
yeah,
0
because
seems
it is-
probably like the best answer.
yeah. Either 0 or the default, or I think we can even set it up so that it is, oh no, it's not lazily initialized like list is, so probably just 0. We can replace it with array empty.
Yep. And then the first call to add will make it hit its grow path, and then that'll be fine.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. We'll see how long it takes to be sad about this. One way or the other.
Right. The risk is that people will use it who maybe should have done something else, but hopefully not.
Yeah. All right. Okay. Well, thanks everyone for joining us, especially on that doghouse, bike shed, whatever. And see you next week at our same .NET time on our same .NET channel. Until then, English today. See you later.